Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the brother of two sisters missing in Aberdeen for over a week tells the BBC they were just trying to live a normal life in Scotland. Eliza and Henrietta Hushti have not been seen since the early hours of January the 7th when they suddenly left their rented flat.
We don't understand this whole thing, that they wrote a message to their landlady, that they wanted to immediately end their tenancy agreement.
We'll bring you more from that interview in just a moment. Also on tonight's programme, going nowhere fast. Disappointment for campaigners as a report rejects speeding up the dueling of the A9 between Perth and Inverness. The First Minister reaffirms his commitment to eradicating child poverty, but the SNP is accused of failing to turn around the fortunes of our most deprived.
Coming up in the sport, Rangers host Aberdeen at Ibrox with both sides desperate for 3 points. And Gregor Townsend has named his squad for the Six Nations.
And Lorraine Kelly will host July's Island Games in Orkney as the event draws thousands of athletes to Scotland for some thrills and chills. Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Wednesday's programme. The brother of missing sisters Eliza and Henrietta Hushti has told the BBC they hadn't told their family they were planning to leave their rented flat in Aberdeen. Speaking from his home in Budapest, Josef Hushti said his sisters, who disappeared in the city 8 days ago, were just ordinary girls from Hungary living their life in Scotland, and the family remains at a loss as to what has happened to them. Louise Hosey reports.
More than a week since they disappeared, the Hungarian family of Henrietta and Eliza Hushti remain desperate for answers. At his home in Budapest, hundreds of miles from the Scottish city where his siblings vanished, their brother says they're struggling to make sense of it all.
We don't understand this whole thing, that they wrote a message to their landlady, that they wanted to immediately end their tenancy agreement. We didn't have any information about that. Even when my mother spoke to them on the Saturday, they didn't mention anything about it, that they had any plans to move out. No. They decided after they finished school that they wanted to try to start a new life abroad.
Életet, és ők ott szeretnék ezt végigvinni.
The family supported them in every way. I don't believe they would have mixed with the kind of people that would lead them to disappear.
The sisters, who are two of a set of triplets, were last captured on CCTV in Aberdeen's Market Street in the early hours of January the 7th. Police say they crossed Victoria Bridge, then turned down a footpath along the River Dee. Yesterday, the officer leading the investigation, which is not being treated as a criminal inquiry, said the sisters had told their landlord in the days leading up to their disappearance that they wanted to move out of their rented flat in Aberdeen.
I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart the people of Aberdeen and the Hungarians living there for the enormous number of messages of support. I'm sorry. And the police there who are tirelessly searching to help find both my sisters. Thank you so much.
Josef says he plans to travel to Scotland in the coming days or weeks. Police say one of the main theories they're working on is that the sisters have entered the water. As searches continue, so does the family's agony. Louise Hosey, Reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
The First Minister has reiterated his commitment to eradicating child poverty in Scotland by delivering more family-focused services, improving education in disadvantaged communities and easing the two-child cap on benefits. But opposition parties have accused the SNP of consistently failing to put its money where its mouth is. The Scottish Government's own figures show that almost a quarter of children here still live in relative poverty, a number that's remained pretty consistent since they came to power in 2007. And it's some way off the target of 10% the government had set for 2030. Our political correspondent Kirsten Campbell reports.
The Dueling Peace Club's been providing support for the community in Castlemilk in Glasgow for half a century. Now staff say families are struggling to afford the basics.
It's the cost of living. I mean, people need, be it the minimum wage needs to go up, people's living wage needs to go up, the benefit cap needs to go up. People need money so they can get themselves out of poverty as well.
The two-child cap means families can only claim benefits for their first 2 children. That's something the First Minister would like to change.
If the United Kingdom government does the right thing and abolishes the two-child cap across the United Kingdom, the resources that we've committed to this policy will continue to be used on measures to eradicate child poverty in Scotland.
If the UK government doesn't act, John Swinney aims to mitigate the cap by next year, even sooner if he can get the systems up and running.
There's a bit of a row about how it's going to work in practice. The Westminster government's promised to cooperate, but it says the Scottish government isn't quite sure about what data it needs. Meanwhile, ministers here at Holyrood are adamant they wrote to the Department of Work and Pensions before Christmas to ask for information.
Other parties question whether the Scottish Government's social security bill is affordable.
I think this is something that the SNP has to tackle from its own choices. I think one of the big difficulties that they have at the moment is to know how they're going to pay for a lot of these policies when it comes to social security.
They are continuing to pretend that just welfare is the route out of poverty. Actually, give children a home, a job, well-paid jobs, skills, expertise. That's how you lift them out of poverty.
Charities say children from low-income families in Scotland are better off than they are south of the border. But roughly a quarter of Scottish kids, that's 240,000, still live in poverty.
We are seeing real progress. That's not coming through in the data yet because there's a time lag in the data, but there's no question that, in particular, the Scottish Child Payment is making a big difference.
These children are growing up in a country with a legal target to reduce child poverty to 10% by 2030. Ministers say austerity, Brexit and COVID have made that more challenging. We'll know by the spring if they're on track. Kirsten Campbell, reporting Scotland.
Well, meanwhile, the Prime Minister came under fire from one of his own Scottish MPs today over what he called the UK government's inability to save the Grangemouth oil refinery as it winds down. Brian Leishman, the Labour MP for Alloa and Grangemouth, said he was appalled by Sir Keir Starmer. The PM claimed his government had done more to find a future for the site than their predecessors. Well, our Westminster correspondent David Porter has been following this story. David, tough words from Brian Leishman today.
Laura, very, very tough and strong language and very direct language, bearing in mind particularly that this is someone who's only been an MP since July. He is criticising his own government and, in effect, taking the Prime Minister to task. The Grangemouth refinery is Scotland's only oil refinery. It is due to close in the summer with the loss of 400 jobs directly and perhaps many more indirectly. Its owners, Petra Ineos, say that it is losing a huge amount of money and it can't compete with facilities in Africa, Asia and the Middle East. But Brian Leishman, who is the constituency MP that covers Grangemouth, is clearly very frustrated. He believes his own government, a Labour government, could and should be doing far more.
It's an appalling set of circumstances. We are the party that were born out of the trade union movement, and right now the inaction on this issue from government level is nowhere near good enough.
From what you heard, the answer that Keir Starmer gave, does he get it?
I honestly don't think he does.
Yeah, strong words indeed. What's Sir Keir Starmer's response been?
Well, the UK and the Scottish Government are jointly funding something called Project Willow, which is looking at the long-term future of Grangemouth and the whole wider site. Today, earlier in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister was forced to defend his actions.
Within weeks, and importantly, we announced a £100 million deal for a growth deal, and we're jointly funding Project Willow to find a viable long-term future. It is a really serious point. I take it very seriously, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that viable long-term future is there for the workers, for their communities, and all that rely on it.
Now, ministers in Westminster and indeed in Holyrood are acutely aware of the importance of Grangemouth. It is one of those totemic industrial facilities, particularly in the east of Scotland, and they are very aware of whatever happens to Grangemouth could be very important in the long run-up to those Holyrood elections in 2026.
Coming at us fast, certainly, David. Thank you. Now, it was a project that was meant to be completed this year, but the dueling of the A9 between Perth and Inverness remains far from the end of the road. Now, proposals drawn up to accelerate the upgrading of the major artery have been rejected by the Transport Secretary amid fears they might actually slow it down. This is the current state of the A9 with duelled sections there in blue. As Andrew Thompson reports, it's a story, it seems, with some way yet to travel.
The A9 dueling project is aimed at improving safety by removing single carriageway sections of the road, like this one here at Tomatin to the south of Inverness. There's been upset about delays to this project, with the completion date being moved back to 2035. And Holyrood's Public Petitions Committee had recommended that the scheme be accelerated. But bosses at Transport Scotland in a report say that doing several sections of the work at the same time could result in delays, price increases and problems with the supply chain. Campaigners, though, are not impressed by the findings of that report.
Obviously, I'm very disheartened, but I'd be a complete liar if I said I was in any surprise at all, because this government seems absolutely determined to do it their way, regardless of the advice of the experts that have given evidence in the inquiry.
The committee had also recommended that sections of the A9 with the worst safety record should be prioritised for dueling. But in this report, transport officials say that the current schedule is the best option. Scottish ministers are defending those findings.
And I've looked very closely at it. An acceleration would risk delay. It would also put a concern around certainty of funding. Now, both of these things we know that the Parliament doesn't want to see. In terms of rescheduling, you could, but that would delay the programme. So having looked very carefully at that, we will stick to the plan that we've already published.
Ground clearing work is underway here ahead of construction of a new dual carriageway section between Moy and Tomatin in the coming weeks. But for people that use this road on a regular basis, the completion of the whole A9 dueling programme between Perth and Inverness can't come soon enough. Andrew Thompson, reporting Scotland, Tomatin.
OK, well, Lewis is here with the sport now. It was a complete goal fest last night. We were watching out there in the newsroom. Are we expecting more of the same tonight?
Well, I'll tell you what, the neutrals would enjoy that, wouldn't they? It certainly was a goal fest, but what I do know is it's two teams desperate for 3 points, so it'll be intriguing. Thanks very much, Laura. Hello there. Yes, Rangers can chip into the huge gap at the top of the Premiership table when they host an Aberdeen side looking for their first win since November. Martin Dowden is at Ibrox.
Both clubs under pressure, but perhaps more so Rangers given the 16-point gap at the top of the table. This game in hand against Aberdeen tonight at Ibrox offers the opportunity to cut that by 3, and you'd expect it's surely one they simply must take. A majority of fans unhappy with the position they're in. A minority staged a walkout protest during the 3-1 win over St Johnstone at the weekend, and after fierce criticism of manager Philippe Clement, he said in the build-up to this, he's not a quitter, he's a winner, and wins are exactly what he needs right now. For Aberdeen, they're on a winless run of 11 matches after a blistering start to the campaign where they were level pegging with Celtic. They have already beaten Rangers this season at Pittodrie and came from 2 down in Glasgow to draw with Celtic. That's exactly the sort of level they'll need here tonight if they're to leave Glasgow with anything positive. Martin Dowden, reporting Scotland, Ibrox.
Celtic manager Brendan Rodgers says his side didn't do the basics well as they came from behind to earn a dramatic draw with Dundee. Aaron Donnelly's header had given the Dens Park side a 3-2 lead going into injury time, but Arnie Engels' penalty rescued a point for the league leaders and extended their advantage at the top, at least for now, to 16 points.
We made them wobble, and that's a Champions League team. And we sensed it, we went for it, and I thought we did everything we could to go and win the match. And somebody's just told me that had been the first time a Dundee team's won it. Dens for 36 years, and I thought my players deserved that tonight.
Normally we've defended very, very well throughout the throughout the season, but for whatever reason we went soft.
Tennis, and Jacob Fernley's incredible rise continues after the Scot booked a place in the third round of the Australian Open, where he'll play a blockbuster tie with world number 2 Alexander Zverev. The Scot, ranked just inside the top 100, who's playing for the first time at Melbourne Park, came back from a set down to beat Frenchman Arthur Cazot. They played on an outside court where there was a raucous atmosphere despite a smaller crowd. That was thanks to a bar just behind the players' chairs there.
I actually didn't really look at the court before I went on, so when I saw the bar, I was thinking it's going to be a pretty rowdy atmosphere. It's usually they go together, a bar and a rowdy atmosphere, so it was interesting, but as I kind of settled into the match, I kind of blocked it out as much as I could. Obviously there was some supporters who were extremely drunk, but it was a great atmosphere, amazing atmosphere.
Rugby, and Scotland head coach Gregor Townsend says his team have learned from last year's disappointments as he named his squad for the Six Nations. Townsend's side have been tipped by some experts to make a big impact after losing 3 of their 5 games in 2024. Let's look at who's made the cut then, starting with the forwards. Johnny Gray is back in, hoping to play his first game for Scotland for 2 years. Plenty of experience there too, with the likes of Xander Fagerson, Grant Gilchrist and Jamie Ritchie. As for the backs, Finn Russell will once again be tasked with pulling the strings at fly half. Record try scorer Duhan van der Merwe will be hoping to add to his tally. Glasgow Warriors' Kyle Steyn is injured but could play in the latter games of the tournament. 2 uncapped players among the 37 faces in the squad. New Zealand-born fly half Fergus Burke qualifies to play for England, but he's committed his international future to Scotland, while Glasgow's number 8 Jack Mann is rewarded for his good form at Scotstoun.
Home advantage, momentum, luck with injuries, bounce a ball could decide results. I think it's a fascinating tournament. Ireland are the reigning champions. France had a really good November. Other teams are competing to do better and do well in this year's championship. So yeah, I think it's going to be, we know, 5 very tough fixtures for us against quality sides.
And it's going to be a big campaign for this man, Sione Tuipulotu, who will continue to captain the national team in what he hopes will be the start of an important year ahead on the pitch.
It's the biggest, couple months coming up in my rugby career, and there's no point getting here and, not going for it. So this is what I've worked for, my whole life. So I'm here now, and it's just about going out there and, executing on what I know I can execute on.
Can't wait for the Six Nations.
Lots to look forward to.
Lots indeed. And of course, Laurie, you can listen to an exclusive extended interview with Sione there. He sat down with our reporter Paul Barnes. That's coming up on Reporting Scotland News at 7.
Good stuff. Look forward to it. Also, thanks Lewis, coming up on the BBC Scotland channel. Scottish indie legends Franz Ferdinand tell us how fatherhood inspired their new single.
For me, before my son was born, lots of people told me, you're going to love him so much. I was like, yeah, of course I'm going to love him, but I wasn't prepared for quite how overwhelming that sense of love was going to be, and also how unfamiliar that love was. In the song I say, I thought I knew what love was, and then I met you, because that's really what happened.
And you can see that full interview with Franz Ferdinand on the BBC Scotland channel straight after this programme at 7 on the new Reporting Scotland News at 7. Tune in. Now, the Orkney Islands are well known as a land of immense natural beauty and Neolithic sites. So important they've been granted World Heritage status. Each summer, they welcome an influx of thousands of seabirds that attract ornithologists from far and wide. Well, this summer, Orkney is set for another invasion of thousands. And this time, it'll be athletes from all over the world competing in the Island Games. And organisers have enlisted a Scottish national treasure for a starring role, as Suzanne Allen reports.
It's going to be absolutely brilliant, of course, could not be held in a better place.
This was the moment Lorraine Kelly revealed she was going to be the host of the opening ceremony of the Island Games.
And teams from 24 islands from all over the world will be coming to Orkney.
They're the biggest games you might never have heard of. Previously, they were held in Guernsey. This July, athletes from 24 islands will compete across 12 sports in the space of a week. Organisers say it's similar in size to a small Winter Olympics.
It's an international sporting competition. It's a multi-sport competition. It's very much like if you imagine the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games, except instead of participating countries, it's all islands from across the world.
Orkney will be the smallest islands to host in the Games history. So where do all the cyclists, golfers, gymnasts, organisers and spectators stay?
We've had to do a lot of work to make sure that the accommodation model will work. We've obviously got the existing hotels, B&Bs and self-catering, but to complement that and supplement the numbers, we've had to turn 4 of our schools into temporary dormitories. And we've also had to bring in containerised accommodation, which we'll be building in the UHI Orkney car park as well.
Competitors will come from across the globe, from the tiny St Helena to Bermuda, the Falklands, Gotland and Greenland. What can athletes expect from an Arcadian Games?
The triathlon is going to be a cracking event. It's one of the first events. It will kick off on Sunday the 13th of July, and it'll be amazing to see athletes from all across the world diving into Stromness Harbour and perhaps having a wee bit of a shock at the temperature compared to the island waters that they're used to, but we're really looking forward to it.
Athletes from these games have gone on to Commonwealth and Olympic glory. With 6 months to go and 800 volunteers already signed up, the islands are ready. Suzanne Allen, reporting Scotland.
And more exposure for Orkney today after The Outrun, which was shot on the islands, was nominated for Best British Film at the BAFTA Awards. Saoirse Ronan's also up for Best Actress for that. OK, now let's look to our very own star here in the studio. Judith. Beautiful. Wow, what a scene in Edinburgh. It's lovely.
And I
there.
had to choose
I know that very
this
well.
picture because I used to have a wee gang hat along there when I was a kid.
Did
I used
you?
to jump over the wall, yeah.
Memories.
Yeah, Polworth in it.
I shan't ask anymore.
Lots of fun back there with my bestie, who's still my bestie now as well. Now, as far as our weather is concerned, we've seen lots of sunshine across the country today, and we've even reached a balmy 16 Celsius. Now, why is that? That was across northern Scotland. It's because we have high pressure to the south of us, and coming around the high in the western flank of it, we're drawing up some very mild air indeed. And not high strong enough to take any energy out of weather fronts that come our way over the next couple of days. So it's a very static weather pattern at the moment. Now, tonight we start off mainly dry with some clear spells. Still that bank of low cloud across the south, but elsewhere we'll see some thicker cloud pushing into the northwest, some outbreaks of patchy rain or drizzle, some of that extending into the Northern Isles, mainly Shetland. Quite a brisk southwesterly wind over the Isles and the Northern Isles, breezy elsewhere, and it won't be particularly cold where that thicker cloud lingers, but maybe a wee bit cooler across the mainland, even colder in the northeast where clear skies could linger. Now, tomorrow it generally is a cloudier start, a breezy start as well, some early sunshine in the east. We still have a bank of cloud over the northwest and the Northern Isles, but come the afternoon we'll still keep a bit of feet of cloud coming in across certainly Shetland on a steady and pretty strong southwesterly wind. Some breaks coming through for Orkney, I think, and I think Caithness as well, but generally eastern Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine, and temperatures I think we could see 12-13 Celsius along the Murray coast tomorrow, maybe a wee bit higher than what we're seeing behind us. A bank of low cloud lingering across southwest Scotland, and with a bit more south in the wind pushing it into the southern highlands. Still cloud lingering along the west coast as well, a few breaks here and there, the wind just breaking up that cloud at times, but thicker cloud lingering over the western Isles, Skye and the northwest, and again those winds will be pretty strong here as well. Into tomorrow evening, very little change before we see a weak front bringing cloud and outbreaks of rain into western Scotland, and winds will pick up as well with gales across the western Isles too. Then into Friday, cloudy with some rain in the west, but that bit dies away. In the east we'll see some sunshine, so generally it becomes drier. It'll be quite breezy, windy over the northwest, and temperature-wise mild. That's your forecast.
Thank you, Judith. We'll talk more about your days back in Edinburgh in a moment. Thank you.
Happy days.
Now to tonight's main news again. The brother of missing sisters Eliza and Henrietta Hushti has told the BBC the family remain at a loss as to what has happened to them. Speaking from his home in Budapest, Josef Hushti said his sisters, who disappeared in Aberdeen 8 days ago, were just ordinary girls from Hungary living their life in Scotland. The Scottish Labour MP has said he is appalled by Sir Keir Starmer and the UK government's inability to save the Grangemouth oil refinery as it winds down. And that is Reporting Scotland for now. Anne McAlpine will have your late news at 10:30. Until then, enjoy your evening. Good night.